Hello, welcome to today's session. We just allow a moment for everyone to come through the door and then we will get started. Welcome if you've already joined us. We're just allowing a moment or two for everybody to arrive. I can see people are still arriving, so we'll begin in a minute.
It's great to see that AI is still a very popular topic.
It certainly is, Josh. I can see people flooding through, so we just give a mo and then we'll begin. I think we're almost ready. Okay, let's begin. Hello, welcome to today's session. I'm Rachel Reed, Director of Insight here at ETOA, and I am delighted to welcome back one of our most popular presenters from last year, which is Joshua Ryan-Saha. So hello, Josh, how are you?
I'm very, very well and delighted to be asked back. It's always a very much a privilege to be asked back.
Well, yes, we're really looking forward to an update. So what we're going to cover today is an update on AI and tourism from when we last met with Josh, which was about 8 months ago. And the speed that these things move, I think there's probably quite a lot to update us on. So looking forward to hearing that in a moment. A little bit of housekeeping. We will make this recording available to you afterwards, so we'll send you the link. And we have got the chat facility open this time. Unusually for one of our webinars, we've got the chat facility open for everyone to see. So when Josh asks for ideas and examples and things that you're doing, type them in there. Other people can benefit from what you're writing. Just bear in mind that all the delegates can see what you're writing in the chat. It's for us to share some of our things and make it a bit more of a collaborative experience. So do please feel free to do that and ask your questions. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Josh.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rachel. And again, I'm absolutely delighted to be back. I want this to be really useful, really practical, really helpful for everyone on the call. And what you just mentioned, Rachel, around the need for getting a bit of sharing is really, really important, especially at this stage of where we're at with AI. I think we're all probably using it in little bits, either on a personal level or within the business or whatever that might be. And I think that means that sharing is good. I definitely don't use it perfectly, and we'll get into that. So what I'm going to try and do is talk a little bit about what has changed. So I think it was November that I was very lucky enough to speak to the ETOA community, and we're about six and a bit months on, and quite a lot has changed. Positive, negative, some really exciting developments, some maybe slightly concerning developments, and all of these things we need to start to understand and get on top of. So without much further ado, I'll explain who I am. So I'm Joshua Ryan-Saha. If this is your first webinar with me, then it's a pleasure to be able to do this for you. I've got a background for the last 8 years working just in technology, data, and AI in tourism. And I've been leading this sort of work in Scotland, where I'm on the industry leadership group chaired by our minister, but also I'm on the boards of various different museums and hospitality trustees and all this sort of stuff, just to try and help input the direction of where AI is going. And my background is quite varied. I worked a bit on BBC Horizon TV programming when I worked at an organization called Nesta. I lived and worked in Bosnia and Herzegovina for a little bit, and worked a little bit on the London Olympic Games. And the 11 years is not the age, that's the amount of years I've technically been working in AI. But don't worry, I am not an expert. Here's a little fez for me. And the reason I say I'm not an expert is I think that it's very difficult to be an expert right now in AI. There definitely are those working in OpenAI, those working in Anthropic, and so on. But the reason I say I'm not an expert is I see myself more as a communicator of the stuff that I'm seeing in the environment. And don't get me wrong, I like to think that I know a lot about AI, but you have to be really humble in the face of the changes that are coming up. And that's why it's so important that when I go through some of these questions, that we all share. We share openly, because actually our collective expertise is what matters in the tourism industry. And I like to think that if we do it well, tourism and hospitality might be the industry that actually can benefit the most from AI. So, very quickly, final thing about me. I work at the University of Edinburgh's Futures Institute. I'm the lead for all things tourism, travel, and hospitality and festivals. I also have a network of about 200 travel tech businesses that predominantly in Scotland, but also into the UK. And our ambition in Edinburgh is to be the UK centre for travel tech innovation. So that's what we're trying to do, and hopefully, this will be a useful presentation in achieving that. So what we're going to cover, there I am dancing away. Well, what has changed since 2025? If you were there for my webinar before, we're going to have more examples of AI in tourism. We're going to have a decent sized bit on responsible and trustworthy and ethical AI. Very, very important, especially in European tourism. But then I'm also going to dive into how I use AI, because I thought, well, if I'm asking other people to share, I probably need to share as well. So I really want to talk about it, partially because I don't think I use it perfectly, but equally, I think we all use it in a way that is probably quite sort of specific to our own personalities and the own way that we find things interesting. So that's what we're going to try and cover. And I used a few quotes last time, and this is the one I probably always come back to, which is the future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed. And I think if you look at AI at the moment, there are some companies that have embedded it deeply into their organization. There are some individuals who are developing amazing companies using AI. So people are using it, they're defining what the future is, and it's unevenly distributed. And some people say tourism is often the last to get to this. I don't think that is the case. But I think there's a lot that we can learn from others. And the best way to learn is to keep on taking from what others have done well, adapting it for our own circumstances. Now, Rachel, I'm going to ask you a few questions. I hope you don't mind. And people, do please put your questions into the chat. This is a rapid fire, Rachel. So,
Oh, is there a right answer?
There's not really a right answer, no, but we'll see. So, how has your AI use changed since the start of 2025? And this is for everybody, but Rachel, unfortunately, you just get picked on.
Well, do you mean on a personal level, Josh, or are we thinking about the ETOA?
Personal level,
On a personal level,
yeah.
and I have to say, um, I'm finding the AI on a Google search to be becoming increasingly accurate. And I do find myself going, oh, I haven't actually read anything further than that. So when you type in the questions there, I'm finding it to have really improved in what it's throwing up as a very brief summary. And I think a lot of people I'm just hearing, around and about, is that the ability of AI to give an accurate summary of something that's got lots of information out there, I think has really improved. And I do find that very useful.
Yeah, there's three snippets of wisdom in there, I would say. One, that Google is really starting to come into its own in AI, and they've, in the past it was seen as ChatGPT being the lead. I think Google has certainly caught up. It's changing search. We're going to do a lot about that. I think that's really important for everyone on this call. And I've forgotten the third thing, but it is really, really important, I think, to keep track on what's happening. Search is definitely changing, and Google is just a dominant player, right? So I have a few other questions for you, very quick ones this time, and please do put your thoughts into the chat. How has your change using AI? One thing I do a lot is record my own voice so that I'm getting my ideas into AI tools and then working with my own ideas. Right, so have you used
Yes, we will. Just to say, Josh, we're already getting some things in the chat.
Oh, good.
I think Maya has just added something that they use it for, is copywriting and social media. Is something that's very, very prominent. I think people see that. And we have got a question from Michael underneath around ethics. And I know, Michael, glad that you've joined us. I saw you also submitted that in your pre-questions. I think we're going to come to that, aren't we, Josh? We'll go through your beginning things, and then we'll come to that, because I think it's a really important point that Michael's made.
So if I was to do this in a room, all of you in a room, and I asked you, have you used ChatGPT? What I'm finding is that everyone puts their hand up because everyone knows it. But this is for you, Rachel. I expect you might say yes here, but have you used Claude by Anthropic?
Well, the answer is not knowingly.
Oh.
Could I have unknowingly used it? I don't believe I have, Josh.
Well, so Claude is a great company. It's by Anthropic. It has a big focus on customer data privacy, security, and interoperability, so connecting into your own data. So that's one. Have you used Perplexity, Rachel?
No.
Oh, that's an AI search engine. Don't worry, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. Some big deals that have taken place relating to travel. They're working with TripAdvisor. Now, have you
Mhm.
used Mistral?
I don't believe I have. Should I be
Don't
using
worry,
all
don't
these
worry.
in addition to Google and the normal searches then, Josh? Should we be using them separately or additionally, or what's your take?
I think these are a range of tools that are really good. They're not just ChatGPT. They all do very similar things to it, but I think there's a mix, and they're all quite good. Mistral, importantly, is a European leader, so it is a French company. Their chat is called Le Chat, and I think one of the things I always try to do, especially when speaking to a European audience, is make sure that we do talk about the amazing AI innovation in our continent as well. So I wanted to get that in there. The reason I'm doing this, and hopefully people in the chat can respond, is do broaden, go beyond ChatGPT. It's got a lot of mind share, but it's not the only thing. Now, do you pay personally for an AI tool, or do you buy AI software at all, or anything like that?
Not yet, although we do use Salesforce, and they are very keen on us to start buying their AI software, which is all about sort of being more efficient in your customer services responses. But we as yet have not been paying for anything.
Okay, really important. I mean, this is, I'm going to say this quietly because my wife might be in the room behind. I spend far too much money on far too many of these tools. And it's partially because of my job and I'm trying to explore them. But a quick point, you do get more out of them. There's a lot more power. You can use them a lot more frequently. So if you're a heavy user, I would certainly consider paying. Right. That's enough from that side of question.
Just one thing to add, though, if you don't mind, Josh, because Maya has typed into the chat as you've been speaking. In her opinion, Claude is perfect for languages that aren't English. She said
Oh.
so. She's been looking in Georgian, so I suppose that's a much less widely spoken language, much better apparently.
Oh,
So
wow, I didn't know that. So that's really good to know. And obviously, translation is such an important part of the capability of AI, especially in Europe and especially for tourism. So that benchmarking of where is the best is going to be really important. So in the chat, if you have any particular tips or advice on the tools that you use for other people on the call, please put them in there because this is what it is. It's about sharing. Like I said, I think I'm a good communicator about this stuff, but I'm not the only expert in the room. I'm sure there's many people on this call who have good stuff to say. Right, now we're going to get into a bit more of the presentation side. So I'm just going to dive in. This is a quote I often use as well, which is you overestimate the impact in the short run and underestimate in the long run. But with AI, I think that's changed. What we're seeing now is actually major changes already. So monthly traffic to Wikipedia has gone down by 1 billion fewer visits a month. Now that's massive. And it's partially because of the things that Rachel were talking about. When you're on Google, you often get this AI snippet at the top, and it means you get the answer first. You don't have to find it through those 10 blue links. And for organizations like Wikipedia, they're being cited in AI snippets, but people aren't visiting as frequently. So it's changing the way that we view the internet. And then, of course, many of you may have seen Microsoft this year investing $80 billion in AI data centers. What's that? Why am I saying that? Well, just the sheer scale of capital investment has to be the major signal that AI is important for all of us because every major company is investing more than we have ever seen in this terms of infrastructure. Incredible amounts. So we need to keep an eye on it. And then finally, for tourism and travel, they say that 18% of people last year used it to plan their holidays. It's undoubtedly a lot more now. And so, in fact, some studies in Asia have shown about 60% of people are using AI to plan their trips now. So, AI is here. We have to adapt. Now, quick scan over what AI is. Well, what can it do? It can create text. It can create images and video. It can create music and audio in really high quality in multiple languages and various things like that. And of course, it can do code and analysis. Now, often it's forgotten what it can interpret. So it can interpret all of these things as well. You stick code into these tools and say, what does this mean? It'll tell you. But an example of interpretation, there's a really great blog by Ethan Mollick. He's great on LinkedIn. I recommend you go and see it. And what he did was take a picture of the floor of his plane and said, well, where am I? He didn't tell him it was a plane. And he was able to articulate very quickly just from this one image on your left. that it was a plane. And then he showed them the panel up front and was able to accurately describe which exact plane he was on. So the interpretation capabilities of AI is really important, especially from an image perspective. And I think that can be used in tourism in a whole range of ways. You know, if you're a visitor, where am I? All of this sort of stuff. So the thing from last year, the big change was multimodal AI. And so multimodal AI was how you can connect all of these different, almost like senses together. And I'm going to give you a few examples what I mean by multimodal AI. The first is the poetry camera. Obviously, a amazing tool that everyone would want to use, but the poetry camera, basically, if you take a big picture of anything, anywhere you are, maybe on the beach, then instead of a photo that comes out, the camera will take the photo, interpret the image, and then print a poem about that image. Not particularly useful, but a great example of multimodal AI, a very fun little tool. There is the Meow Talk app, which I am slightly less sure is 100% accurate, but the idea is that it will input audio from your cat and then be able to analyze it and give you a sense of what it is after. Now, I have a cat. I'm very skeptical that this is accurate, but an interesting idea nonetheless. And what it's trying to show is that audio to text to interpretation, and actually this one even can contact you if there's maybe they need food. So it can actually implement a next action as well. So very interesting. Now, from a more serious point of view, there's some really exciting implementation of multimodal AI with Alaska Airways. What they have is passive recording of all the chatter that takes place by baggage handlers or engineering staff or pilots, whatever it is, and they're able to quickly interpret that chat between communication between these different members of staff, and then turn that into a predictive score to help understand whether that flight's going to be delayed so they can tell their passengers before. So they're using a lot of different sensors and modes and then creating a next action that is useful in terms of planning. So that is where we're seeing multimodal AI at the moment. Now, this year, it is all about agentic AI. So agentic AI is where we autonomously execute actions. So rather than having to have a multiple dialogue, we say, go away and do this thing and come back to me where you need me to help you make a decision. And then we'll do it together. And it can even potentially do things like booking hotels, trying to find detailed information that may not be easy to find just by one or two searches, and a range of things. We're going to get into this now. So this has very much come from my friends Holiday Extras, who did a great presentation, and so I'm taking something that they have done. But one example is what's in the fridge. So if I take a picture of my fridge and I say, you know, what's in it, then it can say, well, these are the items in your fridge. Do you want some recipes? Yes, here are some recipes. And then I say, well, I don't have these things. So don't worry about it. I'll execute an order. So maybe go into your phone and go through an online ordering app and then execute the order just for the ingredients that you're missing. Or it will be able to take control of your phone browser and then search and find and execute an order. That's the idea, at least, that it can actually solve the problems dynamically for you. And there's a few ways that this is being realized. I think the first has been very much in the world of development, where if you go and use Anthropic's Claude Code or Cursor or a range of others, then essentially what happens with these tools, if you're a software developer, is that the agentic AI component will complete almost like auto-complete the code that you're generating. It is very much speeding up the process of software development. There are some downsides though, and we are seeing already that junior software development jobs are decreasing. So, you know, there is an impact on jobs. Now, there are other tools in the world of coding that, again, are agentic. So there's a term called vibe coding, and the tools that I'm showing you here, one is called Lovable, one is Replit, there are a few others. And basically, you can ask these tools to create a sort of small web app or website for you that does a certain function. So I did this trying to help create a translation tool for a whiskey distillery. And basically, it puts a lot of the coding and software development power in your own hands to sort of do little problem-solving apps Really, really interesting space. And I suspect many of you will have ideas for that. Now that's sort of the coding side. The big other area has been something called deep research. And on the left-hand side here is an example of some deep research I did, looking at advanced sort of AI and tourism use cases for presentations like this. Now, basically what you do is you set it a task. It might take 15 minutes. It might explore up to 200 websites, and then it will bring out a really, really detailed report all about it. Great examples. It will provide sources. So it's really good, but there's a couple of things. One, well, it's like your own consultant. So, you have the way you set the question, the framing of these deep research is really, really important. It can be very wordy, but it's very, very powerful. And I think it is almost thinking of it as like a consultant. However, there are two major downsides. One is you need to check the sources. You need to make sure that what it's providing back to you is relevant, it is important, and it's real. I've used this tool a lot. I still see a lot of hallucinations or lies. And then the final thing is we still need real research. This is a deep research tool. It's like a meta research tool. But if you're doing any work with your customers, you still need to ask them what they think. You need to do surveys. If you're in academia, we still need that ground research so that it actually ends up feeding into these meta research tools. So deep research is another example of agentic AI. We've set it a task and then it'll do all these research tasks. So the next one. Now, these are the ones you may have seen in the news, which is really the sort of pure agentic AI world. And I've used two examples, one from Google, which is Project Mariner, and then one from ChatGPT, OpenAI, Operator. And both of them use travel-orientated examples. So Operator, it always talks about, well, find me the best holiday and then book it for me and execute it. And they can actually take payments. So they have a way of doing payments using this, but they'll keep on asking you for permissions at various stages. But essentially, you can send it away, it'll find the things you want to do, and then it will go through the payment process and booking process on your behalf, admittedly, with a bit of dialogue back and forth. And Project Mariner, which is the equivalent for Google, they always talk about how you can potentially order tickets for festivals or events, or make orders for food delivery or that sort of stuff. What's interesting there is I do wonder whether these agents will then start competing and how that might work for these really high profile events that there's massive competition to go and see, like Oasis that are coming to Edinburgh in the summer, or Taylor Swift. People are queuing up and trying to get those tickets. Maybe people have tons of agents trying to do it. In fact, I suspect that might be happening now. There's a questionnaire about equity and fairness and reselling. It's an interesting environment. Now, it's not there yet with this agentic AI. Payments are good, but it's not every single one is using it. We still need a lot more digital identity proof, and there's a lot of cybersecurity risk there, no doubt about it. These agents take too long. They take a long time to do it. It's quicker for us to call up our takeaway and book it rather than get an agent to do it. That is speeding up all the time. It's too costly, really, as well. It's quite computationally heavy to do these agents to execute tasks. So again, that cost point is going down. And then the final thing is it still asks you a lot of questions. So it still has to come back for your approval, your thoughts. It's really, really good, but it's not something like just do this for me and go. These agents, especially in customer facing areas, are great, but not yet there. But the future is interesting here because a lot of the questions are around, well, if we use agents, will I just ask it to find me the cheapest price, not have to search for things individually? So there are two major questions when it comes to agentic AI and how that may change distribution. Will we be able to trust it? Will we trust it to execute bookings on our behalf? Will we be confident that it can handle our personal sensitive information in a way that is secure? And then will it disintermediate the travel booking system? So will it bypass OTAs and connect directly to suppliers for the cheapest price? Or will it go to OTAs to help navigate that world because OTAs have so much data? We don't know yet. So I don't know what the future is here, but there are potentially lots of futures. The key thing is if you are seeking more direct bookings, you need to be playing the game of AI. And then the final big change, I think, in AI in the last sort of 6 months has been wearables. A lot more people are wearing Meta glasses or glasses like from this company here. Project Astra by Google as well is creating context-aware AI tools. So you might be seeing a lot more people wearing these AI tools or having context-specific information. So more geolocation fed into AI tools. So it's a really exciting time. I think this has huge implication and bearing on travel.
And
Um,
Josh, can I just ask something on there? Because as
yeah.
soon as I saw that picture, I thought about Google Glass, and nobody wanted to wear the glasses. Do you think something's changed since
Um,
that time?
Really, really good question. I do think some things have changed, but my own personal response to seeing someone with Meta glasses makes me feel still uncomfortable. I think, well, how is my information being processed? Am I being identified dynamically? Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of different risks to it. I do think the perception has changed though. I've seen 4 or 5 people, admittedly, I do run in some technology focused environments. So, that's one of the things.
Mm.
Um, should I think I have a question for you actually to get things going.
Oh,
Is here. Um, from a business perspective, and this is for everyone on the call again, how have you started using AI that's different? And there may be areas you want to that are stopping you. And so I wanted to just ask that, see what you thought.
and I would say, by the way, in the chat, I think it was I can't go. I'm trying to just scroll up back up the chat. Uh, uh, Martin said he was using the deep research, and that was saving a lot of time. And I think it's definitely something we look at in ETOA sometimes when we know there's loads of sources to have a look at. It sort of helps as a starting point, doesn't it? But I think then Michael made a really interesting point about the whole, research, using AI for research in your business. Is that, I mean, do you think people are just going? It sort of defeats the purpose if at the moment you can't quite trust what's coming out, like you say, Josh, in the deep research. Yes, you've got some things, but you're having to go back and pick out holes that you as a human know or would disagree with. I think that's probably I've answered the second question really, which is what's stopping people.
Yeah, yeah.
It's this whole, well, if I can't actually trust what's coming out, I mean, and I will say without naming names, obviously in my area as insight director, there are certain statistical sources that I think are not reliable and are easily out there on the web. And I do think, I haven't tried this actually, Josh, I'm going to give it a go and actually see if I ask for specific tourism statistics where
Yeah,
they come from, because a lot of it is things that are, you have to pay for the report to actually get hold of it.
yeah,
So I'm
yeah.
assuming it can't get that. And the ones that are just out there, I question. And I do wonder actually, Josh, do you, in the deep research, does it say the sources, or
Yes, it
is
does.
it does, because I
Yeah.
think that's a worry for people, that's stopping people on that side of things. I know a lot of people that definitely use AI for copywriting, and I say as well, when I'm organizing these kinds of sessions, I have sometimes put that in and said, oh, give me a kind of starting point. And I find what stops me from using all of it is it becomes overly gushy, about things. It sort of it starts off, but then it becomes very well, almost over the top. Maybe it just doesn't suit my style, but some of the things you think, no, we're just having a discussion, we're not kind of
Yeah, yeah.
solving the entire problems of the world.
That's right, and I'm going to get onto both of those points, but let's address the deep research one now. Then I'll go on to some AI applications. I know there's loads of questions in the chat, and I'm going to speed it up a little bit so we can really get into more conversation and answer some of these. Deep research, it's a great starting point. You can see the sources. It's useful to interrogate them. Don't park your brain. This is about bringing your own expertise, but it gets you to such a really good starting point. Best use case, I would say, is when you're trying to buy something. So I'm advising a lot of tourism businesses about the technology they could buy, they could utilize. I was speaking to a big hotel in Scotland yesterday, and it just gets you, if you have a really detailed conversation with someone, you frame the problem, stick it into these deep research tools, let it go away, it will come back to you with 20 really interesting tools. Now, you don't just hand that over, you then get into it and be like, oh, well, this isn't right, or this is. So it's just an amazing, incredible starting point, and it's really detailed, and it's really, really powerful. So if you're hesitant because you think it might be wrong, don't be hesitant. But if it's a topic you're not an expert in, then give it a try, but you're going to have to do a little bit of work. If you are an expert in, you'll see the problems, but that's okay because it just gets you to a really good point really, really quickly. So I love deep research. I think it's excellent. It takes a bit of time, 15 minutes sometimes, but to really get to grips with something, it's so fast. You're talking about weeks of work in sometimes 15 minutes. It's pretty incredible. Now I'm not going to ask this one because I think, but I'll let people put it into the chat. So, because I think just in terms of time, I'm going to just rattle on. I'd love for people to share the best use cases they've seen. I'm going to talk about a few of my favorites, talk a little about search, but put it into the chat, get sharing. Because again, this is why ETOA is like such a useful thing, right? It's about how does the membership come together and share. I've got some good ideas. I suspect our collective intelligence is much better. So I'm
Well,
going
I
to
would say, Joshua, just on the search
yeah,
topic, yeah, there's a lively chat going on. I'm struggling to
yeah.
keep up with
I know.
all of the comments, but I think Angela Skelly, who's on from Travel Curious, delighted to have you, Angela. Really looking forward to our session at the Travel Tech Show in a couple of weeks as well.
I'll be
Um,
there.
there you go. Join us Wednesday afternoon. Angela's going to be on my panel, but she was just talking about, you know, the factors to consider if you're trying to be found by AI. You know, thinking that if this may eclipse Google, you know, how do I get found? And then we had a follow-up kind of question or comment in the chat from Francisca about advertising. What should I do about my advertising if I'm kind of busy with my SEO for Google, but actually I'm going to need to be ready to be found by a different method?
Yeah.
Are my Google ads going to become less relevant? So those are the two things people are talking about on
Good, because I'm going to come into all of that right now. I'm going to
Great.
talk through three areas: customer service and engagement. That's a really quick one. Then discoverability, promotion, and then a little bit about back office, because I think that's, again, such an important area. Right, so let's get into it. We may have seen, I think I shared this in the last presentation, that there were some problems with these AI chatbots around customer support, and Air Canada had done one. It was right in 2023, and it was giving wrong information. Now, the key thing here is airlines haven't given up on this. And you can see here, there's Sama from Qatar, there's Yana from Sri Lanka, there's Singapore Airlines. Almost all the airlines have actually continued. So almost Air Canada went out in front, had some problems, but this has kind of been a bit of a solved problem. You can really calibrate these tools now so that they don't hallucinate, don't make things that are wrong. And you know, often the way that they do that is have lots of AI agents who all work together, and then they come out with an answer in these sort of chatbot environments. So a lot of airlines have already done this, and we've seen it in hotels. I shared loads of examples last time. This is an area that, you know, been able to have a chatbot for customer support, providing answers that are much quicker, that includes customer information. A lot of the bigger companies are doing it, and you can now buy a lot of these tools off the marketplace as well. But what I think has been interesting since November is they're moving away from just responding to customer inquiries to actually influential communication. So you've got things like Hotel Planet AI, a Swifty, which came out of Lufthansa's Innovation Hub, and they're actually executing sales via AI chatbots or even AI calls. So they're actually able to influence and then lead people to making a sale, which shows that these voice AIs or these text AIs are becoming a lot more persuasive, and also are able to connect into some of those payment methods as well. So they're able to like connect into things like Stripe and so on, or bring them into your chat interface. So that's a really exciting development. And it means that if you are low on staff, or you think that AI could potentially be an interesting funnel for you, then these types of tools are starting to come about. Now, from a sort of more creative side, I shared the DALL-E phone from Florida last time, where you pick up the phone, you can chat to DALL-E. Well, now you have people like University of Cambridge creating tools where you can chat to the animals or the objects within the museum. So this has been exploding, and people have a lot of fun with it. And you give different voices, and this is a gentleman talking to a dodo. So this is a new creative sphere in AI. It's also being used in places like the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, which has helped you explore more. So they've created interesting questions to help you understand and explore the museum before you arrive. So their question is, what do you love? And I said here, I don't love this, by the way, but fishing on my own. And then it created a sort of suite of things that I could go and see that represent fishing on my own. So a really lovely way of being able to explore what's within a museum. And then I was in a Whitney in New York recently, and you're seeing a lot of AI artwork as the exhibition. So this is on the back here, an image that actually is regenerated as new data is input into it. So you're getting data from the weather, from pollution, from temperature, all this sort of stuff, and it changes the image that is on the screen about the Hudson River in New York. So, that data then going into AI tools to recreate new things, really, really interesting. And of course, in terms of a dynamic conversation, you just have to look at the OTAs, and they're doing some really great innovations. So Booking.com has a whole range of new features, from smart search to better overviews of reviews for each of the specific properties that you're looking at, to also being able to dynamically change your booking in free text. Romy by Expedia is particularly good at bringing in different group profiles, so you can almost like collectively plan your trip. And Fliggy in China has been bringing in live availability data so that you can plan out your information across multiple different things like your restaurants, your hotels, all this sort of stuff. Definitely look at what Booking launched recently. I thought that was super impressive. And smart filters as well, so that you can really narrow down on the place you want. So again, what does that mean for us? It means we need to be really detailed in our product descriptions. And if we're selling a lot for OTAs, we need to be making sure we're getting that right and our availability is connecting into them. So answering that question you had, Rachel, right at the start, marketing, search, discoverability. Let's get into it. So we talked about this before. People are searching through AI a lot more. You can use Perplexity or ChatGPT to get that answer quickly. We're seeing massive impact. So 64% drop in organic traffic. We're seeing a massive decline in web clicks because Google provide that little AI snippet at the top now. This is the major question. So a couple of things that are happening. Well, one is Perplexity has a partnership with TripAdvisor. So if you start to search using Perplexity, you can use one click to then actually book these properties. So, it's been embedded within these new search engines. Really interesting partnership there. But what does it mean for us? Well, if people are asking natural language conversations, we need to provide answers on our websites that mimic natural language answers. So you need to provide a lot more information in the website. You have to design your website so it's for humans and for AI. And what do we mean by that? Well, you need really structured data. So you need data that is got clear headings. It's in the language that answers directly the questions that you are being asked or you think will be asked, or how you might ask AI. And you need to have that with clear tables. Sometimes different fancy looking websites can actually be a problem because the AI crawlers can't actually find the information. So just heavily structured data in quite a lot of dense detail that answers the questions in the way that people want it to be asked is the key way to go. A little bit of a sort of spelling thing here, but SEO practices are still extremely important, because that is a good way of structuring, but don't just be keyword mad. Do think about how you provide specific answers to specific questions in a structured way. Another key thing here is consistent information about a business, wherever that business information is. So if it's on Google, it has to connect in and be accurate and reflect also what's on your website and reflect what's on social media and also reflect on maybe paid for adverts or channels. So getting consistent data about your business is really important. You also need to start building those direct customer relationships through newsletters and social media if you haven't already. I'm sure everyone on this call is doing that, but that is really important because then you can have that direct conversation. If people are going to your website less frequently because they're finding information out from ChatGPT or Claude, then you need to be really pushing that direct relationship. There's some really interesting tools that are out there as well, like Galvendi. I expect many of you know this. And why have I mentioned this in search and discoverability? Well, for hotel rooms, uh, we're still quite narrow in the way we describe it. And people like Galvendi are looking at using AI to provide more detailed, nuanced information about each hotel room. So I always think about this. It's maybe not something that's here yet, but what if you could sell hotel rooms by the quality of the view that you have? And you could take a picture of that view, get it described, and then bring that onto your site and attach it to a specific room. Really interesting concept, Gavin. They're kind of operating in this place. But if you're thinking about nuanced search, you need to provide more interesting and nuanced data about the product that you have to offer. And then finally, don't forget about social search. Here are two companies that are doing really interesting stuff. I mentioned this last time, but it's even more important. Unravel Travel, basically, they bring in social content onto other people's platforms so that you can explore, extract that information, and then do the things that have been validated by humans. You know, people want to see that their influencer has done this and enjoyed it. And Video is more about working with those influencers themselves to extract that information and make a bookable product from it. So social search and AI together is definitely the way it's going because it's validated. I'm going to go through this bit quite quick, but now how do we save time in the back office? Really important for me because I feel like the best use of AI is to do that so we can really free up our tourism staff time to do the thing that they love, which is working with humans. I've talked a bit about this before, but process automation is the way to go. A lot of businesses are looking at robotic process automation where you have maybe 5 or 6 systems and the data moves from one to the other. How do we do that? Well, there's a lot of companies that can do that for you. I'm going to go through a few examples. Procurement is another place. We've seen this company called Folio in the US that takes all of the data from your back office systems and puts it into a shop front so that you can make decisions around where you buy goods and services from. And it gives you the best price based on your past history and then brings in data from your suppliers as well. Really interesting tool, potentially to reduce the costs in hospitality. But the big area for me is professional services. And there's a great book by the Suskins, his father and son, called The Future of Professions. It's quite old now, but it really did predict how this is going to change. And it said about that we may be going to a post-professional society. And I think here that it may be a little bit exaggerated, but when you look at the legal and accountancy profession, there's an awful lot of innovation that's taking place that we can take advantage of. Now, the first example is a great Scottish company. You've got to profile them, but it's called Wordsmith. And essentially, it's like a plugin that you can connect into all of your work that will basically do on-the-spot and ongoing legal reviews. So that it's like if you're doing the first draft of a contract, it'll start to provide a bit of information. Or if you're reviewing terms and conditions, it will review it on the side for you. And it's built in with legal expertise, with human in the loop capabilities as well, so that you're not just trusting AI to provide legal advice, but you can imagine working with your in-house legal teams. This can really speed up the process, maybe even reduce your cost of external legal advice if you've done 30% of the work first. There are also a range of different companies. These are just a few European ones that are looking at accountancy software to do a couple of things. One, really speed up that invoice process, extract information from invoices, put it into one place, or try to better bring together all of the different financial information you might have into one clear, structured space. We know that trying to get that organized for small businesses can be extremely hard. So these are just free companies. These are an awful lot more. I'm going to move on from these because we're running a little bit out of time, but you mentioned Salesforce, Rachel. A lot of these CRM tools are now being developed where it extracts customer information for you quickly and then tailors specific sales packages directly to that customer based on the input that you've put in. So it's a much faster way of doing content creation. Wow, that was a fast one. But Rachel, we're gonna go on to the next question for you and people on the call, and also bring in some of those questions. Search is changing, of course. That back office processing, there's loads of companies that can help speed up how your business operates. But yeah, what were your thoughts on that? What questions are coming in? And then we'll go on to the AI ethics side.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing when you were speaking, Josh, you're thinking more about our members and their business. If I were a traditional tour operator, as it were, this idea that one may be able to just totally bypass all of that, and say, just put this together for me. Because I mean, one thing, we've always said this, oh, the internet will be the death of the travel agent. It wasn't. They're still around, and then, oh, now people can search for stuff, but there's so much to search. They need a search of the search, which, we had all these sites and aggregators. And I think that this, though, seems like another step, if people would ever trust it enough to just go, I want to go to Japan for 10 days, sort that out for me. That is kind of, if that were to become ever reliable enough, that people would do that in any great volumes, I think that could be a concern. But of course, in our industry, we've always seen, I think probably more than a lot of other industries, it relies very heavily on the human touch. And, I suppose I do wonder whether attitudes might change to that, in terms of suddenly going, actually, maybe I don't need the human touch. I think that's probably the most frightening thing for tourism, and equally hospitality. When you've got robots coming around instead of people, because hospitality has always been, clearly about people, and I think that's my scare.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good one, and I'm glad. And I think we're going to go into the reasons why I think that probably isn't going to be the case. I think there's still a massive scope for people who are developing packages, helping people navigate new places. I think AI maybe speeds it up for them. And I think that's the thing which scares me the most around AI is we don't know who's controlling it, right? In a way, like the influence of it. So trust becomes a major, major source of currency. And if you're a trusted brand, then again, that's the thing which is most important. And I wanted to just quickly ask, what's coming out in the chat? Is there any interesting questions coming up just before I go into the final section, and then hopefully answer a couple more questions?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've just got people exchanging a couple of ideas, and what they think of, the booking and the deep research, things like that. But I think it would be good to go back to Michael's question, which I know is kind of partly on the research, which was back at the top of the webinar, and his fear is about losing ownership or
Yeah.
copyright of their materials, and perhaps broadening that is just, nothing seems to be protected anymore. How do I protect my IP, intellectual property? And is there what are the risks around that if anyone can just seem to find anything and turn it into anything?
Yeah, I mean, these are massive risks, and let's be honest, they're not solved yet. EU legislation, I don't talk about it here, but there is a lot around trying to help people, especially creatives whose work is now just being, thrown around. We may have shared our work on the internet. What we didn't ever realize that it wouldn't just be copied, but your whole style and ethos could be copied immediately. And so there's major risks. In the UK, there's a big debate around this, and the creative industries are really pushing back, especially in music. Rightly so, I would say. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but what do you use AI for? What don't you use it for? I don't use it for image generation often, or at least not things that I publicly put out there, because I feel like it isn't right. I think I like to go to illustrators or photographers. I do use it for editing and other stuff like that. But how can we protect ourselves? Well, it's tricky. I think it's about being careful about where and when you share. I think it's about using AI ethically in the way that you want to, so that you don't then generate things off the back of it. But in truth, it's a bit of a different world. And I think the differentiator is always going to be a little bit less about unique IP, and it's going to be a lot more about trust, brand, working really well with customers that see you as the best. So it's not a great answer, unfortunately. I think there's an awful lot of copyright breaking. But maybe I'll dive in the last sort of 5 minutes into some of the other ethical quandaries that we might have. And please do share again into the chat any thoughts you're having, the things that scare you. The last 5 minutes, we'll try and get down to that. So
yeah, just one more just to jump in, Josh, from Angelo again. Just the speed, keeping up with everything is huge, and being compliant. So there's just to carry
big.
those with us into the last few minutes.
Yeah, and definitely keeping an eye on the EU legislation, UK legislation specifically. There may be a big differentiator where European companies we have to start looking at first, because they'll be thinking about EU legislation first. whereas US companies will probably try to battle some of those. I mean, everyone might be. I don't know. I'm making predictions here, but really thinking that through. Right, a couple of dilemmas with AI, and I'll quickly go through this one. Hallucinations. Like I said, in customer service, we can try and solve this as a problem. But the key things here, this is still very important. I shared it on the last one, making sure that if you're working with companies that are building AI tools for you, that they are really using just your data, that they dial down the autonomy and they test it, that they really test it, make sure that it's not going to come out with lies. Now, the big thing with AI is going to be data quantity and data quality. So making sure that whatever they share is going to be high quality data. One of the things I always thinking about is, do we even have the data? And I always use a picture of a boat because with Scotland's tourism, we're very reliant on getting people out to the beautiful islands, and often that data about lateness or reliability or specific information about these boats going to the islands and stuff, it just isn't there. And so if it's not connected in, then people might be making bad decisions. And so I always think the most important thing about AI and AI recommendations is the ground truth data. What is the actual reality? One of the things we're seeing with AI is people are generating content all the time, and then people are then using AI that is then using the same AI generated content to create more AI generated content. So we need to make sure that we're plugging in the best data into these systems. And if there's one thing, it's a bit technical, is that it's changing a lot of this, is something called model context protocol. So AI search engines use something called retrieval augmented generation, which is basically it's search with AI. But model context protocol is a different thing. It's actually developed by Claude. You don't need to know exactly this term, but the key thing is that it connects in real data sets into AI in a more closed environment. So this is a way that we could be able to, in the future, plug in real data into these model context protocol servers. Gets complex, but essentially then you can build AI on the top of it so that it's giving you live availability and you're able to query it using AI interfaces. So it's a different way of doing it. It's not fully there yet, but it's the area that is growing fastest. And that's because of this problem of not having that ground truth data. So it's a super exciting place. And often I think about my own data. Would I even trust it? So if you're using AI for your own management of information within a business, I know that my data is sometimes not the most organized. So we need to think about that. And then a new development, this is another Scottish company, it's called Malted AI, but there are a lot of them, small language models. So a lot of people are worried about putting their own data out into these systems. Well, small language models can run on your own phone or your own computing system, and it can just work using your data, but it has still the same power of language models to generate information. So that's a whole new area, a lot less electricity use as well. So small language models may be a good way of getting over that sort of fear of data privacy. But the biggest problem is going to be trust. And I think, I've already mentioned about content, creating new content that's based on AI content. And that's a big problem. Now, a few things. One, this has come from Ethan Mollick again. But if you look at image generation just from 2022 to 2025, this last month, then this is the same prompt. You now have wonderful photorealistic images that can fool anyone. And it could be of me, it could be of you. So fake AI is becoming almost better than the real thing. And it's happened rapidly. I'm not going to show you this video, but because of time, but you can look at what Google VO3 has been able to do, and it is amazing. So it creates video content that is lifelike and realistic, but it also has voice with it. So that's the first time that has happened, and it's pretty scary. So we can see all the risk of false information that's coming forward. Now, I mentioned last time about if you put into these tools that Steve Jobs is, ask ChatGPT to act like you're Steve Jobs, then it often comes out with better quality answers. Well, one of the weird things that happened in the last few months was that they some of these tools, their internal prompts were actually causing the answers that we were getting back to be quite sycophantic. So ChatGPT had to put out an apology because all of the answers that it was putting out were like, oh yeah, wow, that's an amazing idea. That's a brilliant, it was actually trying to please us too much. And what was really interesting is it really revealed that who's in control of the answers that we get back, who's in control of the tone of the answers that we get back, is these big companies. We need to be really wary and conscious that these are not neutral systems. These are systems that by just a little bit of changing in the back end can really come up with quite different outputs that come back to us. ChatGPT is not neutral, Anthropic is not neutral, Google is not neutral. They control the system output. So we have to always think about and be really critical of what's providing that information back. So we might be going to a position where we distrust what we see, what we hear, and also the information that comes back from these AI tools. So we need to be, as organizations, the trusted provider of data, the trusted brand, and that's where you put your time and emphasis, I think. And then the final bit is the human touch, the thing that Rachel, you mentioned, rightly so, that you fear the most. We lose that in tourism. It's what I fear the most as well. Now, a final quick thing, I've mentioned this before, it's called the brown Play-Doh problem, that everyone has beautiful, wonderful ideas, but you turn them together and it ends up being like gray sludge because we haven't had good marketing copy. It all sounds the same. There's a thing that all AI says, which is, oh, it's not just this, it's that. As like you said, Rachel, when you're doing communications, it all kind of sounds a bit too enthusiastic. Now, I have a proposal for you. I'm not asking to do this, but this is a task that I do that I think is really interesting and can help you break out of perhaps marketing copy that sounds the same. And you don't have to do this and don't do this now, but one of the things I suggest is when you're doing marketing copy, ask it to do it in 5 unusual voices because it really helps you think a bit more creatively. These are the voices I tend to use. So are you a taxi driver at 2 a.m. in the morning? Are you a lonely poet? You're a conspiracy theorist. Ask AI to take on these roles and speak in that way. And I think it'll improve your marketing copy, not because I think you'll talk like a conspiracy theorist, but just because it'll give you interesting and nuanced sentences. So give that a try. I promise you it's a really interesting and fun way to use AI. Bias is extremely important as well as part of the human touch. If you rely on these tools, then you're perhaps you then maybe frame things for different communities of visitors in ways that you might not actually want to if you're too reliant on AI. Remember, where is the AI information coming from? There are a lot of voices that are not input into AI. So a lot of the communities within that our tourism businesses operate maybe don't have a voice in the way that the AI comes out of an answer. So we always need to think about what is the information going into AI systems and where's the information gap. And often some of these gender biases, like what I try and present here, which is if you ask who's going to go to yoga, they will recommend it to the woman, but not the man. And that's, not the right way to do it. So bias is still a really, really important point. Now, this is my final point of the presentation before we get to the final question, Rachel, which is the AI Mirror. It's a book by Shannon Balla, who actually works at the University of Edinburgh. But I think it's really lovely with this final point, which is the AI systems, they reflect the voices, cultures, and values that are prioritized. And also the way that we use AI represents us. So if we use it all the time and we replicate it, then the values that we bring to it, it represents back on us. So we want to use AI carefully. We want to input the values that we have into these systems. And that should be about, I think, sustainable tourism, representing the voice of the host communities in tourism, and also using it in a way that doesn't put AI first. It puts our own staff, our own product, and our own place first. So that's the sort of final point. I've had to rush it a little bit at the end. I'll stop sharing now. And hopefully we've got a little time, maybe 5 minutes to answer some of the questions that are coming in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really important, Josh, that the mirror bit there is a really important point you make. So thank you for getting to that. Yeah, we can just wrap up with a few final questions. I'll just give a moment for that. And just to say, Josh, we're really looking forward to you delivering the AI keynote at our GEM conference in November. So we're going to be looking a lot more about this there. You're going to do the keynote. We're going to have an AI workshop on AI and marketing. And then in the afternoon, we're going to look at future skills in tourism. The overarching question is, will my job still exist in 10 years' time? So really looking forward to all of that. And if anyone does have any final questions we haven't covered, do feel free. I think we've been through quite a lot in the chat, to be honest, though, Josh, because we know we've covered off people's concerns about ethics and being found and the human touch. I think those are all big things for us to think about. And I'll tell you what I think is interesting, to be honest, Josh, is at the end of our last discussion, it was all about, oh, my chatbot, it doesn't sound human, and how do I get it to recognize nuance? And I think there's been a real jump into the kind of bigger, meatier things around AI since our last conversation. Do you think that's true?
I think so. The capability of these systems is really, really good. And I see the questions in there, the feeling of that trust and authenticity. I think the only way that you do trust and authenticity in tourism is often with people, right? But the technology now has definitely expanded, especially in that customer service world, where you can build systems, or you can work with companies, and they can, with a lot more assurance, make sure that it's not just going to come out with rubbish, and that it can escalate in a way that you can feel more comfortable. I think that problem of hallucinations in sort of enterprise systems is probably going away. Hallucination is still a major problem in the major tools, but if you're working with a company that does a chatbot for you, they should be able to eliminate that now, and it should be able to connect into your own data set, and you should feel comfortable and confident, and they should be able to reassure you that that data is not going to leak out into the world. And the regulation of EU will mean that's a really important thing, right? So these two companies are doing better. The technology's moved on. I think also that these things like small language models, I think in the next 6 months we're going to see developments there, so that if you're really worried about that you'll be able to develop these tools just on your data, build out your own tone of voice, and feel much more comfortable. So I think that's going to be a really, really important point. Yeah, it changes so fast. I think the things about that the voice and tone and doing your marketing well, I still see too many people creating a brand Play-Doh. I think always think of it as collective intelligence. These are tools that you use with your own expertise. Don't just throw marketing out there that feels bland. Yeah, I see a lot of LinkedIn posts that are kind of AI generated, and that's fine if it's just if it's just information sharing. But if it's something about trying to get, that brand and tone, then you have to use your own expertise.
Actually, I think I'd maybe just finish on this point. I have teenage sons, Josh, and then one of them described it as sort of doing some research of this. He said, "Well, I could look this up, but I just rocked in my AI bubble." And you sort of think, I see what you mean about that kind of not displaying your, using one's brain. I think that's a concern. We missed
Yeah.
using our own brain.
I've got one final question to answer. Sorry, it said, where do you start? I think what I would start is 1 month. If you're doing a personal basis, maybe buy a subscription to Claude just for 1 month. Set up a project where you put all of the information about your business, the way that your previous LinkedIn posts, the way that you like to talk, all this sort of stuff, and just use that on a once a day basis. Just have conversations with it. When you've got a thing that you're not sure how to do, use that little place. I like Claude. It's one that I use a lot. Use Le Chat by Mistral or others. That's what I would do to get started. Just give it a go and play with it. But as always, don't park your brain. Use it with these tools.
I think on that note, we will leave it there. Josh, thank you so much. What a fantastic presentation. Really enjoyed it, and super looking forward to you coming in November. I'm sure there'll be a whole load more updates, and we will send you the recording tomorrow. So don't worry if you missed lots of the detail, and we hope we'll see you at some of our next sessions. Thanks a lot, Josh, and see you all soon.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.